evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Wynna Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. For the first time in more than 30 months, arrivals do not have to quarantine in hotels. A gunman goes on a rampage at a school in central Russia, killing more than 20 people. And a typhoon in the Philippines claims at least 5 lives. Hong Kong has taken a major step on the road to normality following the COVID pandemic by lifting quarantine for arrivals. The first batch of passengers to benefit flew in at dawn, with many eager to reunite with their families. Joanna Ho reports.
For the first time in more than 2.5 years, arrivals from overseas do not have to undergo hotel quarantine. This group flying in from Taipei was the first to benefit from the 0+3 arrangement, which took effect at 6 a.m. The departure time of their Hong Kong Airlines flight was delayed so that passengers could skip quarantine. The plane carried only 9 passengers, including this man who said the new measure saves time. This passenger hasn't seen his family for more than 2 years. He bought a ticket yesterday, hoping to surprise them today. While arrivals are free to go home after undergoing a PCR test at the airport, some still headed to hotels, which they had booked earlier when the 3-day quarantine was in force. This man who arrived from Boston will stay in his hotel for 3 nights, as his booking is non-refundable. But he said he can go out after having a shower there. This expatriate businessman who returned to rejoin his wife decided to spend 3 days in a hotel, as he didn't cancel his booking.
I gotta do it. Get it over and done with. 3 days in the hotel, not so bad. And have meals.
Arrivals can go home or to hotels via public transport on their own. Once their airport PCR test result is negative, they'll be given an Amber Code on the Leave Home Safe app and allowed to go out. But they cannot enter certain premises, such as restaurants, during their 3 days of medical surveillance until they continue to test negative and get a blue code. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Many people already in hotel quarantine were allowed to leave as soon as the new measure went into force. While arrivals were happy, the hospitality sector will continue to face challenges. Here's Janice Lowe.
As pandemic rules were relaxed, people already in quarantine were allowed to leave their hotels after 6 a.m. this morning and receive refunds. But many opted to leave later to avoid a checkout chaos. Lawmaker Wynna Wong and her husband were among those who could go home early. Yong, who returned from Cebu last night, welcomed the ending of hotel quarantine. She will now be able to attend National Day celebrations as her Leave Home Safe app code will change from amber to blue on Thursday if she continues to test negative. This man left a day earlier after checking in on Saturday. As a frequent business traveler, he's glad to save time, but many just missed the cutoff date. This woman, for example, completed her 3 days of isolation today. She said she could have saved a few $1,000s on the hotel, plus around $450 for a test before boarding, had the measure taken effect earlier. Hotels, meanwhile, fear they will lose some business and will have to rely on locals on staycations before tourist numbers start picking up. Winnie Chen from the Federation of Hong Kong Hotels said unless the 3-day medical surveillance is also dropped, it is unlikely that business travelers will flock to the city. Although the industry will offer discounts to attract locals and tourists alike, Chan expects staycation bookings to fall by at least 20% as Hong Kongers go abroad for holidays. Janice Low, HKIBC.
Hong Kong has logged 4,034 new COVID infections, 188 of which were imported. More than a quarter of the local cases, or 1,002, were confirmed through PCR tests. The remaining were detected by RAT tests. There were 12 more fatalities, taking the tally of COVID-related deaths in the fifth wave to 9,915. A total of 2,039 patients who contracted the virus are now in hospital, including 15 in intensive care. People arriving from the mainland and Macau have welcomed the lifting of quarantine-free quotas. They said it's more convenient and less costly. Chloe Feng reports.
Limits were lifted today on the number of arrivals from the mainland and Macau under the Return to Hong Kong and Come to Hong Kong schemes. Before today, up to 5,000 Hong Kongers could make use of the Return to Hong Kong scheme per day, and 2,500 people from the mainland and Macau could use the Come to Hong Kong initiative daily. People from the two areas will no longer need to have PCR tests on arrival, but have to be tested on their second day here while undergoing 3 days of self-monitoring. Many of the mainlanders crossing the border via Shenzhen Bay Port welcomed the changes, saying they made travel more convenient, especially for those wishing to go abroad from Hong Kong.
之前真係要交錢俾嗰啲黃牙去幫我搶嗰個名額，但係而家真係可以直接。
This woman, who studies overseas, said in the past she had to book a slot in the quota from scalpers, costing her $2,000 more just to cross the border. She can now reserve a spot on her own, adding that the entire process is faster.
都係咁麻煩。點樣麻煩法咧？都係過關嘅數碼登記啊，我哋都喺度搞。
But this Hong Kong resident who returned from the mainland said the procedure was still complicated because of several registrations and QR code scans. And she said going back to the mainland is still difficult because she will have to be quarantined in a hotel for a week. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
Cardinal Joseph Sen and 5 others have gone on trial, charged with failing to properly register a fund that helped anti-government protesters. The prosecution at West Kowloon Court said the 6 who pleaded not guilty had a political objective, as the now defunct 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund was set up during the protests in 2019. Although they ran the fund as trustees or committee members, the prosecution said the defendants did not register it as a society. The defense expressed concern that some aspects of the case might be related to the national security law. The judge said the proceedings will only deal with issues related to the society's ordinance. An engineer has pleaded guilty to rioting and stabbing a policeman during a protest in Causeway Bay 2 years ago. Wang Kwan-wah appeared in the district court this morning, along with Law Kok-sum, Percy Chow, and Wang's girlfriend, Zheng Zicheng. The stabbing occurred when the officer tried to detain Law and was obstructed by Chow outside Queen's College on July 1st, 2020. Wang was charged after being arrested on a Cathay Pacific flight to London that night. Apart from pleading guilty to rioting, Law admitted resisting arrest and Chow obstructing the officer. All 3 were remanded in custody until sentencing next month. Chung, who is accused of trying to help Wang escape, denied perverting the court of justice, and her trial will continue. Overseas now, a school shooting in the central Russian city of Izhevsk has left at least 13 people dead. Videos circulating online show students and staff running for their lives. 7 young school children were killed and more than 20 people injured. About 1,000 children were on campus when the gunman, reportedly a former pupil, burst in with 2 pistols. The gunman, who reportedly had a swastika on his shirt, later killed himself at the scene, about 1,000 kilometers east of Moscow. 2 security guards are among at least 6 adults who died. Typhoon Noru has killed 5 rescue workers in the Philippines and left millions of people without electricity. And in the United States, the state of Florida is taking precautions as a storm is expected to turn into a hurricane. Waves thrashed onto land in the Philippines as Typhoon Noru barreled its way across the country. As it approached Manila, rescue workers patrolled seaside villages, telling people to evacuate. Many complied with their children and belongings in tow, while others battened down their hatches. In Noru's aftermath, many towns were left flooded in waist-deep, muddy waters. The typhoon was the most powerful storm to hit the Philippines this year, slamming into Quezon province yesterday. It then gradually weakened as it moved across the main island of Luzon, causing blackouts and forcing thousands into emergency shelters. 5 rescue workers died after their boat was hit by a collapsing wall in Bulacan province. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. inspected affected areas by air. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, there was calm before an expected storm in the U.S. state of Florida. The country's southeast and neighbors Cuba and Cayman Islands are bracing for tropical storm Ian, although its path remains unclear.
Expect heavy rains, strong winds, flash flooding, storm surge, and even isolated tornadoes. Make preparations now.
A third storm, Hurricane Fiona, which is now dissipated to a post-tropical cyclone, has left Canada battered and bruised. Hundreds of thousands of people remain without power. The U.S. dollar has continued its upward momentum as the British pound sank to an all-time low, and China took steps to stop the yuan slide. The People's Bank of China is imposing a risk reserve requirement of 20% from 0 at present when financial institutions buy foreign currencies through currency forwards. The move, which takes effect on Wednesday, will make it more expensive to bet against the yuan. Meanwhile, the British pound continued its free fall, diving 5% in Asia to an all-time low. This comes after finance chief Kwasi Kwarteng announced the biggest increase in borrowing in 50 years to pay for massive tax cuts, which will mainly benefit the rich. The Hang Seng Index has closed at a new 11-year low in trading, marked by concerns about major global currencies. Banking giant HSBC stumped 7.5% as the British pound continued to tumble. CK Asset, the property arm of Cheung Kong, lost 8.6%. But casino stocks hit the jackpot after China gave the green light for mainland tour groups to visit the gambling hub again. Sands China jumped 15.6%, while Wynn Macau gained 11%. The suspension of hotel quarantine lifted travel-related stocks. Online travel agent Trip.com and China Travel HK each rose more than 5%. A look at the markets now. The Hang Seng Index closed down 78 points. Top 10 active stocks, Tencent up $8.20, Alibaba up 30 cents. Sands up $2.76. In foreign exchange rates, the euro is at 7.57, British pound 8.47. And in foreign markets, the UK FTSE is down 53 points. Finally, the weather, mainly overcast with sunny intervals and a few isolated showers. Temperatures will range between 27 and 32 degrees. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. And that's our main news for Monday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Wynna Wong. Thanks for watching. Good night.